let's have a few more things just to illustrate cuttings. And these weren't on the list, but these are all different types of willow. Some of them are green, some of them are brown, some of them are yellow. Some of them are specifically good for basketry. See that one? It's long and thin. They can grow up to about 8-10 foot tall in one season, but they'll stay thin, long and thin. So they're perfect for weaving or making baskets out of. And yeah, if anybody wants to take one of these, they will all grow. They'll grow into proper trees. And all these need is maybe a few of the lower leaves taken off, burying between a quarter and a third of the length of that shoot will produce a new plant which can root. And can you see that bit at the bottom? I've ripped it off the old plant. Rather than cutting it off, I've left a heel. That's the old growth on there. So the stump that I cut these from, that's a bit of the stump, the older stump. And that will keep the cutting alive and help it to root in the next however long it takes to root. So that's a crucial bit about taking cuttings. You can observe there's the older wood on the bottom. And rather than cutting above that, where there aren't any viable buds, the new roots are going to come where there are existing buds now, which is at that base point and wherever there's a little bud at the stem. So those are an extra bonus. You can keep them alive just by putting them in water. Any old soil will do for them. But yeah, one more thing about that is if I wanted, again, if it was precious and I wanted lots of cuttings out of it, I could start to subdivide it, cut it across where there's a bud and strip off some of the old leaves. That would make a cutting perfectly good as well, smaller plant. But the same applies to each and every bud going all the way down, and there's about 20 or 30 buds. And just to illustrate that, let's start there. So I've got a leaf and a bud at the top, and I haven't damaged that bud when I cut it just now. So there's my new growth. That's the bud or shoot bit that I want for next year. Now, if I go down the plant removing the buds lower down, that's creating a wound, but that's, again, where the roots are going to fall. First, cuttings callus over, they mend the wound, and then they work out, am I above or below ground? If they're below ground, that's going to become a rooting point, like you saw on the watercress. So, actually, I'll go to the extreme of, that's got 2 buds, one of which I've removed lower down, one of which I've left on higher up, and if I plant that like that, that will form a new willow tree next year. So it's going down smaller and smaller scale, but it depends how many plants you want. And yeah, each one of these willows, each plant has produced about 50 or 100 new shoots each year. So I don't actually need loads of that. But yeah, nice to have a collection of willows. Rosemary is one of my favourite regular examples. And what's happened here is this shoot grew up straight, got a bit heavy, and it flopped down. And so that's actually the top of it. It was growing like that, but because it's got top heavy, it's flopped down. And now I've got lots of these little vertical growths coming up from the lateral stem. And each one of those, if I rip it off by hand with a heel of the old wood and then strip off the lower leaves, each time I'm stripping off leaves, I'm creating another wound, which will then heal and form a rooting point. So that would be the way to take a cutting of rosemary. And rosemary is a relatively hard wood, so I can do this at any time of year. Some things like I've got geranium here, that's illustrating a softer, sappier type of plant, which I'd rather do in the summer. But if I can keep them warm through the winter, I can do it. Again, ripping off with the heel of the older wood, removing the lower leaves, and partly this is because I want to reduce the amount of transpiration. So if I leave that big leaf on, it's going to lose more moisture. It'll need to draw more moisture up. So I'll take that, all the big leaves off, and I might even reduce the surface area of these leaves, just so it's still alive as a leaf, but not evaporating and transpiring too much moisture. And then burying that in, again, the cuttings compost up to about there. There'll be a new growth up here. So initially, when we put it in the cuttings mixture, this is just a tube, fundamentally. And if it's warm enough, moisture will be drawn up to the growing point. And if I reduce the amount of growing leaf surface area, that reduces the stress, how much moisture needs to be drawn up the tube. After a couple of weeks, there'll be callousing and roots will be starting. After a month, I should see vigorous new growth where the shoot is, because it's actually started to form a new root system. So that's illustrating that.